Hey everybody, another week, another episode of Retrospective. This week, however, is going to be a short one. It's going to be more of a review of last year rather than a comparison because, hey, I'm out on holiday enjoying that little hobby we all like to call real life. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Now, our first segment of the day is, of course, calling all devs, and this week we've got Ross Hopwood, systems designer, on the line. Ross got a question that we've all experienced at one point or another. You know when you're landing on a planetary surface and the landing ramp comes down and it's like 3 or 4 feet above the ground and you're sitting there looking into your ship thinking, that's where I should be, but I can't get there. Why can't I get there? I want to get there. Please let me get there. And this ship says no. That's what this question is about. They're wondering when we'll be able to mantle to get into those hard to reach places. Now I know what you're thinking, but Tomato, we just saw in last week's ATV that they're working on mantling and vaulting. Shouldn't that be in the game? You would hope so, but not quite. Unfortunately, when they were showing that tech, they weren't showing it to highlight the mantling and vaulting. Ross said that they were working with that to prototype the animation stretching tech that they were showing off in last week's ATV. So while it might be working for them in the studio, it's not quite in the game yet. And what they did have working, at least at the time, Ross said was manually marked up. So rather than the game understanding procedurally when mantling would be an option for the player, they had to code it into any ledge specifically. I cannot imagine that's how it is now, but he gave no real specifics. So we do not know when we're going to be able to mantle. Now I hear it's in the PU right now, but it's pretty hard to get it to trigger. So for now, until it's stable, we'll have to cross our fingers and pray to Great Noodle Jesus that some improvements are incoming. Now our next question was for gameplay programmer David Coulson, who's been in front of the camera quite a bit this last year. The question for David was, why can't we decouple in cruise mode anymore without losing our speed? Now according to David, this was actually a bug, and it was a very annoying bug, I can confirm. The problem was that whenever you would move off axis of your aim, the throttle would reset your speed. Now this was especially bad for joystick users, but as I said, as of now the problem has been taken care of. In fact, cruise mode has been done away with, which allows us to alter speed freely of flight mode, as well as changing our heading without losing our velocity in decoupled mode. Thank you, Coulson & Co. The next question here was for systems designer Andrew Nicholson, asking if we would see a big change in atmospheric flight with the release of Hurston. Now Andrew did go on to tell us that there were some differences between atmospheric and space flight at the time, but those differences weren't all that noticeable. He did acknowledge that we would see some updates in 3.3. However, the big focus for 3.3 was just getting the planet in. And while there were changes to the flight model in 3.3, they were not that major. We actually had to wait until 3.5 to see the full change up to the flight model, and since then, atmospheric flight definitely does differ from space flight. So it's safe to say that since this question was asked, the flight model has seen a gargantuan amount of focus. And there's no doubt in my mind that there's plenty more tweaks and updates to come, even before Squadron 42 releases. The final question of the episode was for lead systems designer Kirk Tomei, asking if there would be a way to pursue and evade pursuit of a ship in quantum travel. Now as far as sci-fi nerd wet dreams go, this ranks up there pretty high, so Kirk Tomei did confirm that this was a feature they would be working on. And while they had not started it at the time, and we haven't seen anything yet, there are little breadcrumbs that hint at how this could work in the game. As we already know, quantum travel is not a loading screen, it is a physical process, and you can see it completed by other ships in the verse as far back as 2.2. We also know that we can travel with other ships in quantum travel, so following a ship isn't that much of a stretch. and we can already visually detect for a very short amount of time where a ship has left a quantum jump, so it makes sense to think that we could use our ship computer to detect where they entered a quantum jump, possibly allowing us to follow the trail to a point at least close to their destination. Now keep in mind, this is not the idea of chasing somebody down and knocking them out of their quantum travel like something in, say, Star Trek. Interdicting somebody like what can be done to you now in the game. This is more about seeing a snapshot of their travel time and destination, and then deciding if you want to pursue that, maybe for bounty hunters or even for pirates. All that being said, nothing on the roadmap for this, so we'll have to wait for this feature to make it into the game. But this discussion did lead to Jared dropping a hint about a new ship concept coming soon. One of my favorites, might I add. And now time for Around the Verse on August 9th, starting off with some talk about the new Comlink app in the mobiGlas. In this update, which was due in Alpha 3.3 as group system improvements, they introduced a new 3-pane Comlink app. While this update didn't include all the functionality they wanted in the app, they did say that they wanted the app to allow for different groups, group roles, and different responsibilities for those roles. And while those improvements haven't been added, we have seen some improvements like ship-wide comms, the ability to create new parties, see who's speaking, see how many people are in the party, and etc. I'm sure we're going to see much more in the coming months, but for now, video comms are still shaky, and the original idea from this episode has not come to fruition. We also got a glimpse at the new notification system, which if you've played 3.6, then you have surely gotten many dozens of glimpses at it. Next we got a look at Arena Commander rental mockups due for 3.3, and I emphasize these are mockups because if you look at what we have right now, we're missing a couple features like statistics and comparisons, hopefully to come soon. TM. And while those details are missing, we do indeed have the feature of rentals in Arena Commander. After rental talk, we stopped by Kirk Tomei's desk to talk about some turret gameplay and the improvements that were coming to the turrets in 3.3. As I mentioned in previous episodes, turrets have been getting some reworks here and there along with gimbaled weapons to make them easier to use, but they still have a ways to go. There's a lot of disagreement on turrets in the Star Citizen community, but it seems like Cloud Imperium is going to stick by man-controlled turrets and try to make the gameplay fun and realistic at the same time. We also got to see a quick look at both Hurston's moon aerial and Hurston itself, and looks at the environment, which still looks pretty similar now a year later. Speaking of Hurston, we also got to see a scale test on Lorville's outer walls, which I'm sure many of you remember, showing the scale that Lorville would have in comparison to the planet around it. We then dove into the wilderness to see the way the environmental team was using weather to affect the environment. Yeah, I would like some weather like that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty strong wind there.
Yeah, man, that's exactly what I was thinking. Finally, we got caught up with Jared on the progress of the 300i rework, which you can briefly compare to the in-game model here. And we got a brief look at the constellation Phoenix with the jacuzzi, which is still not implemented in the game at this point. And finally, we got to see some of the progress on the damage states for the Aegis Hammerhead due in the game in 3.3, full of steam, explosions, fog, and proto-molecule. This ship, along with the Phoenix and the 300i rework, all made it into the game by their deadlines. And to finish off the week, we had a Reverse the Verse episode with senior character concept artist Jeremiah Lee. who coincidentally was the guest on this most recent episode of Reverse the Verse as well. Unfortunately, we didn't get too much useful information out of this episode, so I'm actually going to skip it for this week, but it still was incredibly entertaining to watch the Star Citizen community try to troll the hell out of Jeremiah Lee, so I will link it in the description if you want a good laugh. I would go and check it out. And that's just about it for this week. I did say it was a shorter episode, and with last week's overworked episode, I think it's okay we take a little load off. Thank you everybody for joining me on this one. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in next week's episode, where we'll be taking another close look at Hurston's moons, as well as Hurston herself, her habs, a look at the 890 jumps progress, including the grotto, which we saw in last week's episode of Inside Star Citizen, and plenty of other tidbits of news. If you enjoyed this recap, please like and subscribe and share with the rest of the Star Citizen community so we can all get a retrospective. And until next time, have a lovely week.